Hi, this is Gabby from Nutrition for Addiction. I am a registered dietitian, and Nutrition for Addiction is dedicated to helping professionals who work with and care for people with substance use disorder to understand nutrition and eating behavior and how that impacts your clients and patients and how you can help them in that regard. So today I'm going to be talking about the impact of stimulant use on metabolism, on body weight, and on food and eating patterns. I'm going to be discussing this through the lens of two studies, one that was a cross-sectional study and one that was a review. Cross-sectional from 2013 and the review from 2021. So generally, people with stimulant use disorder are lower body weight than their age-matched controls who do not use stimulants. And the thought process was typically that it's because they have decreased appetite due to the stimulants and therefore eat less food. Well, the two studies that I looked at seem to refute that and look at the evidence that refutes that and says that that's an oversimplification. Now, why do I think it's important that we know what causes weight loss with stimulant use? For several reasons. One, I think it's important that we know because some people turn to stimulants or relapse with stimulants in order to lose weight. And if we know why they lost weight on the stimulants, we might know why they gain weight when they stop using the stimulants and be able to help people return to health without relapsing. The other reason is we will learn through these studies that there's an impact on metabolism and on hunger sensing hormones from stimulants. And so these mechanisms can give us clues into how to treat people for harm reduction and in recovery to become more metabolically healthy or to return to metabolic health. So those are the major reasons why this topic is important. So a study from 2013 of 65 men in which 35 of them were chronic stimulant users, cocaine users specifically, and 30 men were not. The authors explored circulating leptin, which is known as the satiety hormone, body composition, and eating habits using food frequency questionnaires and the 3-factor eating questionnaire. So the authors found that caloric and specifically fat and carbohydrate intake is higher amongst the cocaine users in that study than in the control group. They found that body weight, tricep skin fold thickness, and percent fat mass were significantly lower in cocaine users than in the control group. So right there we have a discrepancy. It's like they're eating more calories, but body weight and fat mass are lower. Leptin was similar between groups, and that the authors state that there's likely an imbalance between fat intake and fat storage, and that very imbalance could lead to the weight gain when cocaine use is discontinued. So lower body weight and fat mass despite greater caloric, fat, and carbohydrate consumption of cocaine users points to a metabolic alteration. You would expect to see weight gain when someone's eating more food unless something else is changing as well. So something in the metabolism or energy expenditure. Okay, so now the results of 2021 review article. The purpose of this article was to summarize the interactions between stimulants, appetite hormones, nutritional patterns, and metabolic alterations in the emerging research. So the highlights of this review show that there are mixed results as to the impacts of stimulants on hormones, on appetite hormones and neuropeptides such as ghrelin, leptin, neuropeptide Y, and that depends on whether the trials were preclinical trials or clinical trials, whether they were testing acute stimulant use or chronic use, and the dose of the stimulant. So more information is needed there to understand the impact of stimulants on these appetite regulating hormones. But certainly some studies did show an increase in appetite stimulating hormones. Others showed a decrease. Interestingly, the authors look at the impact of stimulant use on eating patterns rather than simply on caloric intake or individual nutrients. The rationale here is that nutritional balance, i.e. the balance between a variety of nutrients in the diet, rather than the quantity of one specific nutrient, better explains metabolic function and body composition. Often people using stimulants eat higher fat, higher carbohydrate foods and lower quantities of protein and show deficiencies in iron and protein. All of the reasons that people might be losing weight despite eating more and eating lower quality, high fat, high carb foods are more complex than simply a reduction in appetite. So the possible mechanisms are impaired lipid storage, which is fat storage, increased sympathetic activity. So the sympathetic nervous system is what controls that fight or flight response, and increased energy expenditure as a result. Altered energy sensing pathways, that's those hunger and fullness hormones we talked about, and impaired glucose homeostasis. These are all proposed mechanisms for weight loss in stimulant use. So the message here is that you should check in with your clients on how they're feeling about their body. Check in as to whether body dissatisfaction, eating disorders, disordered eating, stimulated stimulant use to begin with, or if they're sober, if they're having distress about that. And make sure to reiterate that any information out there about using stimulants to lose weight is highly flawed, because yes, weight loss may happen while using, but it is damaging to the metabolism, and the same reason why you might lose weight while using stimulants could cause weight gain in sobriety and more long-term damage to the metabolism. So that is the takeaway here. The other takeaway, of course, is that people who with chronic stimulant use disorder may be at a greater risk for certain metabolic conditions, and so they should be screened medically and nutritionally for metabolic changes and for nutrient deficiencies. There are some subjects I want to dive into further that this opened up, including what does it look like to eat to restore metabolic health for someone who has been using stimulants and is now sober and has some metabolic consequences due to that? What is the link between eating disorders and drug and alcohol use? What is the prevalence of those co-occurring disorders, and what more can we learn from that? And what is the link between substance use disorder and preference for high carb and high fat foods? We might think, oh, it's obvious. It's just because people have access to those foods. They're cheaper, they taste better, they're less expensive, like I said. But actually the brain and research into the science of the brain might tell us more information about this. And that is something I will look into. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, follow along my channel, give it a like. If you have a question or a comment, please do leave it here. You can find me also on Instagram at Nutrition for Addiction. I'm going to link to my Google Drive, which has handouts that you may freely use with your patients and clients. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.